We're jumping into today's stone about halfway through the process. I've worked this over in the design CZ Port by Michiko here. And this is a cubic zirconium Portuguese design that I found in, I think, the US Faster Guild newsletter, or maybe just the Gemology Project design database. They say it will work in a variety of materials from zirconium and including YAG. And so that's what we're working with today. Everything's cut in at the 600 grit level. And I've also, you can see this facet that's lit up there, that's worked in with the 1200 grit. And I've also done the girdle all the way around at the 1200 grit stage. So those are almost ready to polish. It's a really simple design overall. The tricky part is, as they say in the cutting directions, which I don't have printed, but you can find them online at where I got the diagram from. They say you really got to have your meet points fairly accurate, because over time, you know, if this meat doesn't quite meet up here, then this meat might get thrown off, or one of these side meats might as well. And so it kind of gets sloppier as you go higher up or higher down in the pavilion towards the culet. And I've had this stone on the dop for, I think, over a month now, for reasons that are probably apparent based on the noise. Yes, thank you. But I'm finally trying to get back into this and finish this stone, because the Portuguese design is a relatively simple and straightforward one. And so I guess we'll just keep cutting and go to the next step. Here's where we are with the stone at the 1200 grit stage. It looks pretty good, lots of diamonds on there. I think I'm going to leave it like this, even though there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of facets, or tiers of facets on this. There's supposed to be 5, but if we go to the diagram here, the pavilion has these 5 rows of facets, and then the girdle is at 90. The very tip, or the center point of the pavilion, is supposed to be at 33.7 degrees, which can do no problem, but YAG has a critical angle of 33 degrees. And the critical angle means that if I go shallower than that angle, then light will just kind of pass through. It won't bounce back and be reflected within the gemstone. I guess it works better in this view, where if this angle is too flat, then light will just pass through. But if it's angled enough away from the table, then it will bounce back and have more reflection on the inside. And so 33.7 is, you know, it's bigger than 33, so I could technically do that and it might work out fine. But it's kind of a best practice recommended thing where you don't want to get within a degree or 2 of that critical angle, because kind of as soon as you start tilting the stone, if this angle was at the 33.7, it'll work fine if you're looking straight on in the stone, but if it's very close to the critical angle, then as soon as you start tilting the stone, then you're looking down at a very slight angle, and then that's that critical angle, and it sort of becomes, you're looking at it at a 33-degree angle, for example. And so it very quickly starts windowing, even though the stone itself wouldn't technically be a windowed stone, because when you're looking at it the way you're supposed to from the top down, because you're not always going to be looking at it from that way, if it's tilted a little bit, or you're looking at it from an angle, if somebody else has it, then you'll start getting that windowing effect very quickly. And so I want to reduce that potential. And so I'm just going to leave that off. I don't think it'll hurt the stone. I mean, it won't have quite as many facets, so it may not be quite as, I don't know, sparkly or whatnot, but I think there's still enough facets where we'll get some good bounce of light. So I'll polish this up and we'll move on to the crown in just a few minutes here. stone is transferred, and it's in its final size now, so it's going to be about 10.75 millimeters all the way around, diameter, whatever you want to call it. And I went ahead and went to the first angle, which is 38 degrees on the crown, and cut that in all the way around, just in a sort of preforming shape on the 180 grit disc, because I'm going to have to cut down quite a bit in all facets with the 600 grit. So I figured I didn't need to really worry about getting those facets in place with a very coarse grit, and basically just ground away a lot of the excess. And now I'll switch over to the 600 lap and go through and shape things up and get things roughed into where they need to be. Just about everything is in place on the crown here, except for the table hasn't been cut in, obviously. We still have just a pointed tip, but I'm going to try something slightly different than I normally do, and I'm just going to polish in all the facets and then cut the table in as the last step. And that way, when I adjust my protractor to 90 degrees, I don't have to refine that angle, because it's a lot easier to just stay at that angle and switch out laps than it will be to try to find it exactly and go that way. I'm going in and polishing the last stages of the crown facets apart from the table, and you can see I've still got this, left half to go. I'm about a quarter of the way through, and on the right side are the polished facets, which are kind of, teardrop diamond shaped, whereas they will end up being more of a diamond shape like that. Once I cut in the table, it'll be actually be more of a triangle, because everything above this point here will be cut off, and I'll bring the table down to that meet point and that point and that point and so on around the table. And so when I'm polishing this, I don't have to worry about actually getting a good polish anywhere up here, because it's all going to be cut away, and I just need to focus on this little diamond part down here, which is one of the reasons I usually don't polish this way, because it's kind of a waste to polish the upper half here, which I still wind up doing, because I don't know if we can see it here, but there's a little bit of a gap between the meet point or the tip of this facet and then the tip of this facet down here, where these have to meet up. So I have to cut down a little bit with my 50,000 diamond grit. It doesn't take that long still, but it's just a little bit of a waste because I wind up polishing that very top part anyway. But I figured as I'm doing this, I'd point out something, which is I've got my diamond powder down there on the tin lap wheel, and I was going to touch it down on the lap real quick here. And one thing you want to do when you're polishing is look at the water that comes up after you run it over there for a few seconds, and you can see it's actually kind of clear. It's still a little bit of a milky white, so there is some diamond powder in there, but if that gets a lot clearer, then you're going to want to recharge your lap in order to have enough diamond on there in order to actually polish things. So I just touched that down for a couple of seconds, and let's see, did that do much? So that's the cloudy facet just to the right of the one that's lit up on the left there. And you can see I started to polish more on the right side of the facet than on the left. And so I'll have to do a couple of fine adjustments, maybe lower the platform a little bit, kind of angle it a little more, so I'm getting more of the bottom as I want to cut that down a little bit and focus more on that than the top. So here's where we stand right now. The left side is all polished, and I still got, that 3/4 of the top part to polish up. Well, here is our Neodymium-YAG cut in a Portuguese design with 145 facets. The original design called for 161, but we got rid of a tier on the base. Still looks pretty sparkly. And no window, which is good. Too close. So we'll find out how much it weighs here. And we are at 6.53 carats. And now the final reveal.